The fluorescent lights of Save More Supermarket buzzed overhead like a swarm of angry wasps as Marcus Reed stood frozen in the checkout lane, his hands trembling around 2 containers of baby formula. The store manager, Derek Vaughn, stood 3 feet away, his arms crossed over his pressed white shirt, a predatory smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Behind Marcus, the evening shopping crowd had fallen into that particular brand of silence that only comes when strangers sense they're about to witness someone's humiliation. "Stop right there," Derek said, his voice pitched perfectly to carry across the store. His hand shot out, pointing at Marcus like a prosecutor identifying a criminal in court. "Don't take another step. Security, we have a situation at exit 3. Marcus's stomach dropped like a stone thrown into a well. The 2 formula containers in his arms suddenly felt like they weighed 100 pounds each. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mind was already racing ahead to his neighbor Mrs. Chen's apartment, where his 6-month-old daughter Emma was probably starting to fuss, her tiny face breaking out in the angry red hives that appeared whenever she went too long without her specialized formula. "I can explain," Marcus finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Can we talk about this somewhere private?" Derek's smile widened. He was a man in his early 40s with the kind of aggressive grooming that suggested he spent more time on his appearance than on anything else. His dark hair was gelled into perfect submission, and his teeth were unnaturally white against his spray-tanned skin. He looked like a man who had peaked in high school and spent every day since trying to recapture that feeling of power. "Private?" Derek asked, his voice dripping with mock concern. "Why would we need privacy, Marcus?" "Unless you've got something to hide." He gestured to the growing crowd of onlookers. "These good people have a right to know when someone's stealing from the store they shop at, when someone's stealing from them." "I wasn't," Marcus started, but Derek cut him off with a sharp laugh. "You weren't? So those 2 containers of Alimentum in your arms, the ones that aren't in a shopping bag, the ones you didn't pay for, those just materialized there?" The crowd murmured, a low susurrus of judgment and fascination. Marcus felt dozens of eyes on him, felt the weight of their assumptions. He saw a woman pull her purse closer to her body as if his alleged theft might be contagious. He saw a teenage employee he had worked alongside for months look away in embarrassment. 8 hours earlier, Marcus had clocked in for his overnight stock shift at exactly 11:45, the same time he'd been clocking in for the past 7 months. The time card machine beeped its acknowledgement, and Marcus headed to the back warehouse to collect his equipment. The overnight shift was a graveyard of fluorescent light and silence, punctuated only by the hum of industrial refrigerators and the occasional beep of a price scanner. It was also the only shift that allowed him to be home during the day with Emma. "Reed," Derek had called out from his office, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Get in here." Marcus had set down his box cutter and walked to the manager's office, a cramped space that smelled of old coffee and desperate ambition. Derek was reviewing spreadsheets on his computer, his face illuminated by the cold blue glow of the screen. "You clocked in at 11:46, Derek said without looking up. "Your shift starts at 11:45. That's tardiness. I'm documenting it." "It was 1 minute, Marcus said quietly. The time clock rounded up. Derek finally looked at him, and there was something cold and calculating in his eyes. "A rule is a rule, Marcus. If I let you slide, I have to let everyone slide. Then the whole system falls apart." He made a show of typing something into his computer. "That's your 3rd documented infraction this month. 1 more, and we'll have to have a serious conversation about your future here." Marcus wanted to argue, wanted to point out that his other 2 infractions were equally petty. A lunch break that ran 2 minutes long because Emma had been crying on the phone with Mrs. Chen, and a supposed uniform violation because his work shirt had a small stain from baby spit up. But he couldn't afford to argue. He couldn't afford to lose this job. So he just nodded and went back to work. Marcus Reed had been a pediatric nurse for 8 years. He'd been good at it, the kind of nurse parents requested by name, the one who could find a vein on the first stick and who knew how to calm a screaming toddler with nothing but a soft voice and a ridiculous hand puppet. He'd met his wife, Sarah, in nursing school. She was studying to be a midwife, drawn to the idea of helping bring new life into the world. They'd gotten married in their final year, a small ceremony in her parents' backyard with string lights and homemade food, and so much hope it hurt to remember it now. When Sarah got pregnant, they'd been overjoyed. They'd painted the nursery together on weekends, argued lovingly over names, read parenting books aloud to each other in bed. Marcus had felt invincible then, like the universe had finally aligned in his favor. He had a career he loved, a wife he adored, and a baby on the way. What could possibly go wrong? Everything, as it turned out. Sarah had gone into labor 3 weeks early on a cold Tuesday morning in February. Marcus had driven her to the hospital where he worked, holding her hand through the contractions, breathing with her like they'd practiced in birthing class. For 12 hours, everything seemed normal. Difficult, painful, but normal. Then Sarah started bleeding, and normal became critical in the space between one heartbeat and the next. The doctors called it a placental abruption. The medical term meant nothing in the face of what it actually meant, which was that Sarah was dying, and they had to choose. Save the mother or save the baby. Except Sarah didn't give them a choice. Even as she was fading, even as her blood pressure dropped and the monitors screamed their warnings, she grabbed Marcus's hand with a strength that seemed impossible and whispered 4 words that would haunt him forever. Save our baby girl. Emma Rose Reed came into the world weighing 5 pounds and 3 ounces, screaming with life and fury, while her mother slipped away into silence. Marcus held his daughter for the first time while his wife's body cooled on the table beside him, and he felt his entire world split into before and after. Before Sarah died. After Sarah died. Those were the only 2 eras that mattered anymore. The hospital had given him 2 weeks of bereavement leave. His coworkers had brought casseroles and condolences. His mother-in-law had stayed for a month, helping with Emma while Marcus moved through the days like a ghost. But grief, he discovered, had no respect for schedules or productivity. He started missing shifts, calling in when Emma wouldn't stop crying or when the weight of getting out of bed felt impossible. His supervisor had been understanding at first, then concerned, then frustrated. After 6 months of missed shifts and poor performance reviews, they'd let him go. The termination was dressed up in kind words about needing time to heal and focuses on family, but the result was the same. No job meant no employer-sponsored health insurance. Cobra coverage was available, they'd told him cheerfully, for only $900 a month. He'd laughed at that, a bitter sound that startled Emma into crying. The Save More job had been the only one that fit his impossible requirements. It had to be overnight so he could be home with Emma during the day. It had to be close enough that he could get home quickly if Mrs. Chen called with an emergency. It had to pay enough to cover rent, utilities, food, and formula. That last one was the killer. Emma had been diagnosed with severe food allergies at 2 months old. Regular formula made her break out in hives, made her tiny stomach rebel, made her scream for hours. The only formula she could tolerate was Alimentum, a hypoallergenic variety that cost $47 per container. Emma went through a container every 3 to 4 days. Marcus did the math constantly, obsessively. His Save More paycheck was roughly $1,400 every 2 weeks after taxes. Rent was $850 a month. Utilities averaged $120. Mrs. Chen charged $200 a week to watch Emma overnight, money Marcus insisted on paying, even though the elderly woman protested she'd do it for free. Food for himself was whatever was cheapest. He'd lost 23 pounds since Sarah died, his clothes hanging off his frame like he was a child playing dress-up in adult clothing. That left approximately $202 every 2 weeks for everything else. Diapers, wipes, baby clothes as Emma grew, co-pays for her pediatrician visits, the ancient Toyota's gas and insurance, his phone bill. And formula. Always the formula. He'd tried switching to a cheaper brand once, and Emma had screamed for 6 straight hours, her skin erupting in welts that terrified him. He'd never tried again. Derek Vaughn had been the store manager for 2 years, promoted from assistant manager at a different location. He was the kind of manager who saw employees as line items on a budget, problems to be optimized away. Within 3 months of his arrival, 5 long-term employees had been fired or pushed into quitting. They were replaced with younger workers who could be paid less and who didn't know enough to push back against policy violations. Marcus had watched it happen with growing dread. He saw the way Derek documented everything, building cases against people like a prosecutor preparing for trial. He saw the way Derek smiled when he fired someone, like it was a personal victory rather than a person's livelihood ending. And he saw the way Derek had started watching him, making notes, building his case. The night everything fell apart had started like any other. Marcus arrived at 11:45 exactly, clocked in, and began his routine. Stock the shelves, rotate the older products to the front, check for damaged goods, clean any spills. The work was mind-numbing, which was exactly what he needed. It kept his hands busy while his mind wandered through memories of Sarah, through worries about Emma, through the constant mental mathematics of survival. He was working in the baby aisle around 3 in the morning when he found them. 2 containers of Alimentum, the expensive formula Emma needed, both damaged. One had a dent in the side from being dropped, the seal broken. The other had a torn label and a crack in the lid. According to store policy, damaged goods were supposed to be pulled from the shelves and destroyed. They couldn't be sold because the packaging integrity was compromised. Marcus stared at those containers for a long time. The formula inside was fine. The damage was cosmetic, superficial. The formula would still nourish Emma, would still keep the hives away, would still give her what she needed to grow and thrive. But it was going to be thrown away, tossed into the destruction bin, and eventually sent to a landfill because it wasn't pretty enough to sell anymore. He picked up his radio and called Derek, who was in his office doing paperwork. Marcus kept his voice neutral, professional. "Hey Derek, I've got 2 damaged Alimentum containers in aisle 7. Both are past the sellable point. Can I purchase them at the damaged goods discount? Store policy allowed employees to buy damaged merchandise at 75% off, a perk meant to reduce waste." The radio crackled with Derek's response. His voice was laden with amusement. "Really, Marcus? You want to buy damaged baby formula? That's pretty desperate, even for you." Marcus closed his eyes and counted to 5 before responding. "It's for my daughter. She needs this specific formula. The damaged containers are still usable." Another crackle. "Tell you what, Reed. No. Store policy says I have discretion over damaged goods sales, and I'm saying no. You want formula? Pay full price like everyone else? Destroy those containers and get back to work. And Marcus? Stop wasting my time with pathetic requests. It makes you look weak." Marcus stood there in the empty aisle, holding $94 worth of formula that was going to be thrown away, thinking about Emma's face when she was in pain, thinking about Mrs. Chen's dwindling supply, thinking about the $17 currently in his checking account, and the fact that payday was still 4 days away. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made to her as she died. Take care of our baby girl. He'd promised. He'd sworn he would. At 4:30 in the morning, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He took the 2 damaged containers to the destruction bin in the back warehouse, the large rolling cart where damaged goods were placed before being processed out of inventory. He stared at them sitting there among crushed cereal boxes and dented cans and broken packages. Then he took them out of the bin and hid them in his locker. His plan was simple. At the end of his shift, he would put the containers in his backpack and take them home. They were already marked for destruction. They had 0 retail value. In his mind, clouded by exhaustion and desperation, it wasn't really stealing. It was rescuing. It was survival. He didn't know that Derek had installed additional security cameras in the warehouse 2 weeks earlier. He didn't know that Derek had been watching him, waiting for him to make a mistake big enough to justify termination. And he didn't know that his one desperate decision, born from a father's love and a broken system's cruelty, would lead to this moment, standing in front of a crowd of strangers, while Derek Vaughn played the role of righteous accuser with the enthusiasm of a man who'd finally caught his prey. The crowd around Marcus continued to grow, drawn by the spectacle like moths to a flame. A teenage boy held up his phone, recording. An elderly couple whispered to each other, shaking their heads in disapproval. Marcus felt his face burning with shame, felt the walls of the store closing in on him. The 2 containers of formula in his arms might as well have been bricks of stolen gold for all the judgment radiating from the assembled strangers. Derek pulled out his own phone with theatrical precision, making sure everyone could see what he was doing. "I'm calling the police," he announced loudly. "This store has a zero-tolerance policy for theft. We prosecute to the fullest extent of the law." He paused, letting his gaze sweep across the crowd before landing. "Back on Marcus. We have to protect honest, hard-working customers from people like this." "Please," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "Please, just let me call my neighbor. My daughter, she needs her medication. She needs—" "His daughter needs a father who doesn't steal," Derek interrupted, his voice sharp as broken glass. "Maybe you should have thought about her before you decided to become a criminal." The word hung in the air like an accusation carved in stone. Criminal. Marcus felt it settle over him like a weighted blanket, suffocating and inescapable. He wanted to scream that he wasn't a criminal, that he was just a father trying to keep his daughter alive, that the system had failed him at every turn. But the words wouldn't come. They were trapped somewhere behind the lump in his throat, behind the exhaustion and fear and desperate love that had brought him to this moment. A voice crackled over Derek's radio. "Security to exit 3. That's a 10-4. Marcus felt a small flicker of hope. The night security guard was Javier Santos, a quiet man in his late 50s with kind eyes and a measured way of speaking. Javier had always treated Marcus with respect, had always asked about Emma, had shared his own coffee on the long overnight shifts when they were the only two people in the store. A woman in the crowd, wearing yoga pants and clutching a basket of organic produce, spoke up. Her voice was pitched with righteous indignation. "I shop here every week," she said to Derek. "I spend hundreds of dollars here. And you're telling me this man has been working here while stealing from us? What kind of place is this?" Derek nodded solemnly, playing to his audience. "Ma'am, I assure you this individual will be terminated immediately and prosecuted. SaveMore takes the trust of our customers very seriously. This is exactly why we have surveillance systems in place." He gestured toward the security office, visible through a glass partition near the front of the store. "In fact, we have the entire theft on camera, clear as day." He looked at Marcus with something like triumph in his eyes. "Did you think we wouldn't notice? Did you think you were clever?" Marcus said nothing. What could he say? That he'd taken the formula from the destruction bin? That Derek had denied him the right to purchase damaged goods? In this moment, surrounded by strangers who had already decided his guilt, the nuances didn't matter. The facts were simple. He had taken something without paying for it, and he'd been caught. The automatic doors whooshed open, and Javier Santos walked in, his security uniform crisp despite the late hour. He was a solid man, not tall but broad-shouldered, with salt-and-pepper hair and the kind of face that suggested he'd seen too much of life's darkness to be shocked by anything anymore. His eyes took in the scene quickly, professionally. The crowd, Derek's aggressive posture, Marcus's defeated slump, the formula containers. "Mr. Vaughn," Javier said, his voice calm and even. "What's the situation here?" Derek straightened up, pulling his shoulders back like a peacock displaying its feathers. "Caught him red-handed, Javier. Employee theft." He gestured at Marcus. "Reed here thought he could just walk out with $94 worth of merchandise. I want him held until the police arrive. I want to press full charges." Javier's gaze shifted to Marcus, and for a moment, their eyes met. Marcus saw something there, a flicker of concern, maybe even doubt. "Have you reviewed the full security footage, Mr. Vaughn?" Javier asked. "The full footage?" Derek's voice took on an edge of irritation. "I watched him take the formula and hide it. That's all the footage I need to see." He stole it. Case closed. "With respect, sir," Javier said, his tone still professional but firm. "Store policy requires a complete review of all relevant footage before we involve law enforcement. We need to establish a complete timeline. Verify that." Derek cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Are you questioning my judgment, Santos? I'm the store manager. I saw what I needed to see." The man stole. End of story. He turned back to his phone. "The police are on their way. They'll be here in 10 minutes or so." Marcus felt his knees go weak. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, his life would be officially over. He'd be arrested, processed, charged with theft. Even if he somehow avoided jail time, he'd have a criminal record. No one would hire a nurse with a theft conviction. He'd lose Emma. The thought hit him like a physical blow. Child Protective Services would take her away from him. They'd say he was unfit, unstable, unable to provide. She'd go into foster care, bounce between strangers who wouldn't know about her allergies, who wouldn't know that she liked to be rocked in a specific rhythm before bed, who wouldn't know that she smiled in her sleep sometimes, and it looked exactly like Sarah's smile. "Mr. Vaughn, I need to call Mrs. Chen," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's watching my daughter. She needs to know I'll be late. She needs to know." "Your neighbor can figure it out," Derek said dismissively. "You should have thought about your daughter before you decided to steal." The teenage employee Marcus had worked with, a kid named Tyler who was saving up for community college, was standing near the customer service desk. He caught Marcus's eye and quickly looked away, his face flushed with a mixture of sympathy and fear. Marcus understood. Tyler couldn't speak up. None of them could. Derek had created a culture of fear in this store, where one wrong word could mean termination, where standing up for a coworker could mark you as the next target. But then, Rosa Martinez pushed through the crowd. Rosa was 62 years old, a cashier who'd worked at SaveMore for 17 years, back when it was still called something else and had different owners. She was a grandmother of 5, with steel gray hair always pulled back in a neat bun and reading. Glasses that hung from a beaded chain around her neck. She'd survived 3 different managers and 2 corporate restructurings, and she had a backbone made of iron, wrapped in kindness. "Derek," Rosa said, her voice carrying the weight of authority that came from decades of showing up and doing the work. "I've been watching Marcus for 7 months now. He's a good man. He comes in on time, he works hard, he never complains. This doesn't make sense." Derek's jaw tightened. "Rosa, this doesn't concern you. Get back to your register." "I'm clocked out," Rosa replied, crossing her arms. "Which means I'm a customer now, not an employee. And as a customer, I think I have a right to know what's really going on here." Derek's face flushed red. "What's going on here is that an employee committed theft and I caught him. The cameras don't lie." "Why don't you actually watch the cameras then?" Rosa challenged. "All of them, not just the part that makes your case." Javier stepped forward, and there was something different in his posture now, something that suggested the polite security guard was gone, and someone else was emerging. "Mr. Vaughn, I'm formally requesting access to the security office to review the complete footage from tonight's shift. Store Policy Section 4.7 states that." "I know what store policy states," Derek snapped, "and I'm the one who decides when it applies." He jabbed a finger at Marcus. "He's guilty. The evidence is clear. We're not wasting time on a wild goose chase because Rosa has a soft heart. It's not a waste of time if it's protocol," Javier said, and there was steel in his voice now. "Before I worked here, Mr. Vaughn, I was a detective with the Metro Police Department for 28 years. I investigated everything from petty theft to homicide. And one thing I learned in all those years is that things are rarely as simple as they first appear. The full picture matters." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Are you threatening me, Santos?" "I'm doing my job, sir," Javier replied evenly. "The same job you pay me to do. Providing security means ensuring we get the facts right before we ruin someone's life." The crowd was murmuring now, the mood shifting slightly. Some people were checking their phones, growing impatient with the drama. Others seemed genuinely interested in where this was going. The woman with the organic produce had her arms crossed, watching Derek with new skepticism. Marcus barely heard any of it. His mind was 8 blocks away, in Mrs. Chen's small apartment that smelled like jasmine tea and old books. He could see Emma in his mind, sleeping in the portable crib Mrs. Chen kept set up in her spare room. Emma would wake up soon, around 6:30 in the morning like she always did, and she'd be hungry. Mrs. Chen had 1 container of formula left, maybe enough for 2 feedings if she stretched it. After that, there was nothing. He thought about the rash that would appear on Emma's tiny cheeks when she went too long without food. The way her little fists would clench and her face would scrunch up in discomfort. The high-pitched wail that meant she was in pain, not just hungry, but hurting. He had heard that sound too many times in the past 6 months, each instance carving another piece out of his heart. The automatic doors opened again, and Marcus's stomach dropped even further. 2 police officers walked in, their radios crackling, their presence immediately commanding attention. One was a young officer, probably in his mid-20s, with a fresh crew cut and an eager expression. The other was older, a woman with sharp eyes and the kind of neutral expression that suggested she'd seen every variety of human behavior and was no longer surprised by any of it. "Officers," Derek said, striding toward them with his hand extended. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I'm Derek Vaughn, store manager. We have a clear-cut case of employee theft here." He gestured toward Marcus. "This individual removed merchandise from the store without paying. We have video evidence. I want to press full charges." The female officer, whose name tag read Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen, but the coincidence still made Marcus's heart ache, looked at Marcus with a measured gaze. "Sir, is this true? Did you take merchandise without paying?" Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, then nodded slowly. "The containers were damaged," he said, his voice hoarse. "They were marked for destruction. I took them from the destruction bin because my daughter needs this specific formula. And The officer held up a hand. "Sir, I need you to be very careful about what you say right now. Anything you tell us can be used in court. Do you understand?" Marcus nodded again. He understood. He understood that his life was over, that his one desperate attempt to feed his daughter had destroyed everything. He understood that the system he'd believed in, the one he'd served as a nurse, the one that was supposed to protect vulnerable children, had no safety net for people like him. He understood that Sarah was gone and that he'd failed her, failed their daughter, failed the one promise he'd made as his wife died in his arms. The memory hit him like a freight train, sudden and devastating. Sarah on the hospital bed, her skin paper white, her hand in his growing colder by the second, the machines beeping their futile warnings, the doctors and nurses, his colleagues, moving with practiced urgency that couldn't change the inevitable, and Emma, their baby girl, screaming in the corner of the room, wrapped in blankets, alive and perfect and motherless. Sarah had looked at him, her eyes already starting to glaze, and she'd squeezed his hand with the last of her strength. "Promise me," she'd whispered, her voice barely audible over the alarms. "Promise me you'll take care of her. Promise me she'll be okay." And Marcus had promised. He'd sworn it. He'd meant it with every fiber of his being. Take care of Emma, keep her safe, keep her healthy, keep her alive. Officer Chen was reaching for her handcuffs when Javier stepped forward, his voice cutting through the moment like a knife. "Officers, before you proceed, I need to show you something. I'm the head of security here, and I have serious concerns about the completeness of the evidence being presented." Derek whirled on him, his face now fully red with anger. "Santos, you're out of line. You're insubordinate. Consider yourself." "Fired," Javier finished calmly. "You can fire me after we review the footage. But these officers deserve to see the full picture before they make an arrest that might be based on incomplete information. Right, officers?" The younger officer looked uncertain, but Officer Chen studied Javier with interest. "You said you have concerns about the evidence?" "Yes, ma'am," Javier replied. "I believe the security footage will show that the situation is more complicated than it appears. And given that we're talking about potentially charging someone with a crime, I think 30 minutes to review everything is a reasonable request." Officer Chen looked at her partner, then at Derek, then at Marcus. She seemed to be weighing something in her mind, calculating risks and procedures. "All right," she said finally. "Show us what you've got. But this better not be a waste of our time." Derek sputtered a protest, but Officer Chen silenced him with a look. "Sir, if your evidence is as solid as you claim, 30 minutes won't change anything. But if there's any possibility we're missing something, I'd rather know now than find out in court." Javier nodded and gestured toward the security office. "This way, please." As the group moved toward the back of the store, Derek, the two officers, Javier, and reluctantly Marcus, the crowd began to disperse, disappointed that there wouldn't be an immediate arrest to film and share. But Rosa stayed, her arms still crossed, her eyes following Marcus with a grandmother's fierce protectiveness. Tyler, the teenage employee, stayed too, hovering near the customer service desk like he wanted to help, but didn't know how. Marcus walked in a daze, the formula containers still in his arms because no one had thought to take them. Each step felt like he was walking toward his own execution. The security office was small and cramped, filled with monitors showing different angles of the store. Javier sat down at the main console and began pulling up footage, his fingers moving across the keyboard with surprising speed. Derek stood behind him, his arms crossed, his foot tapping impatiently. The officers flanked the door, their expressions neutral and professional. "There," Derek said, pointing at one of the screens, 3:47 a.m. watch. The footage showed Marcus in the baby aisle, finding the damaged containers, examining them, then carrying them to the back warehouse. It showed him placing them in the destruction bin. Then, 20 minutes later, it showed him returning to the bin, looking around nervously and taking the containers out. He carried them to his locker and hid them inside. "See?" Derek said triumphantly. "Clear theft." He took store merchandise and concealed it with intent to remove it from the premises without payment. Textbook definition. Officer Chen leaned forward, studying the screen. "Mr. Santos, you said you had concerns. What exactly are we looking for here?" Javier's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Context," he said simply. "We're looking for context." The monitors in the security office cast a pale blue glow across everyone's faces as Javier navigated through the footage archive. His fingers moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent countless hours reviewing evidence, looking for the details that told the real story. Marcus stood in the corner, his arms wrapped around the formula containers, like they were the only solid things in a world that had turned to quicksand beneath his feet. "I want to see the full shift," Javier said, pulling up the timestamp from 11:45 the previous night. "And I want to see the days before that." "Officer Chen, how much time do you have?" The officer checked her watch. "We can give you 30 minutes. After that, we need to make a decision one way or another." "This is absurd," Derek protested, his voice rising. "You saw him take the merchandise. You saw him hide it. What more do you need to see?" The young officer, whose name tag read Paulson, shifted uncomfortably. He seemed eager to make the arrest and move on to the next call, but Officer Chen held up a hand, her eyes fixed on the screens. "Mr. Vaughn, if you're so confident in your case, then this review should only strengthen it," she said evenly. "Let the man do his job." Javier rewound the footage to show Marcus clocking in at exactly 11:45. The timestamp was precise, down to the second. "He clocked in on time," Javier noted. "Not at 11:46 like you documented, Mr. Vaughn." Derek's jaw tightened. The clock must have been off. "It happens." Javier said nothing, but he made a note on a pad of paper beside the keyboard. He fast-forwarded through Marcus's shift, showing him working methodically through his assigned sections, stocking shelves, rotating products, checking expiration dates. Nothing unusual, nothing suspicious. Just a man doing his job with quiet, tired competence. Then the footage showed something that made Javier slow down the playback. At 3:15 in the morning, Marcus finished his assigned work in the grocery section. His shift was technically done at that point. He could have clocked out and gone home. Instead, he pushed his cart to the baby aisle and began working. "What's he doing?" Officer Chen asked, leaning closer to the screen. "He's cleaning," Javier said softly. "Look at that." Marcus was on his hands and knees, scrubbing the baseboards of the shelving units with a rag and cleaning solution. He moved to the floor tiles, removing scuff marks and spills that the regular cleaning crew had missed. He carefully reorganized the baby food section, facing every product forward, checking every price tag. The timestamp showed him working for 4 additional hours beyond his scheduled shift, 4 hours of unpaid labor, making the baby aisle spotless. Derek was silent now, but his foot was tapping faster, a nervous tell that suggested he knew where this was heading. "Why would he do that?" Officer Paulson asked. "Why would anyone work 4 extra hours for free?" "Because he cares," Javier said simply. He pulled up another angle, this one showing Marcus's face as he worked. Even in the grainy security footage, the exhaustion was visible, the slumped shoulders, the slow mechanical movements of someone running on fumes. But there was something else, too. A kind of quiet dignity in the work, a refusal to do anything less than his best, even when no one was watching. At 6:30 in the morning, the footage showed Marcus finding the damaged formula containers. He picked them up, examined them carefully, turning them over in his hands. One had a visible dent in the side, the other had a torn label hanging loose. He carried them to the front of the store, toward Derek's office. "Here," Javier said, switching to the camera that covered the manager's office. "Watch this." The footage showed Marcus knocking on Derek's door. Derek looked up from his computer, annoyed at the interruption. Marcus held up the damaged containers and spoke. There was no audio, but his body language was clear. He was asking a question, making a request. Derek's response was equally clear. He laughed, shaking his head. He made a dismissive gesture with his hand, a shooing motion like he was swatting away an insect. Marcus said something else, his posture becoming more pleading. Derek's expression hardened. He pointed at Marcus, then at the door, his face twisted in contempt. "What's he saying?" Officer Chen asked. "I can read lips a little," Javier said, rewinding and playing the sequence again in slow motion. "Marcus is asking if he can purchase the damaged goods at the employee discount. That's store policy. Damaged merchandise that can't be sold can be purchased by employees at 75% off. It's meant to reduce waste." "And what's Mr. Vaughn's response?" Officer Chen asked, her tone carefully neutral. Javier pointed at the screen. "He's refusing. He's telling Marcus to destroy them and calling him." He paused, reading Derek's lips. "Pathetic. He's telling Marcus that it makes him look weak." The small room was silent except for the hum of the computer fans. Derek's face had gone from red to pale, the color draining away like water from a broken vessel. "That's not," he started, but Officer Chen cut him off with a sharp gesture. "Let him finish," she said. Javier fast-forwarded to the footage Derek had shown earlier, Marcus carrying the containers to the destruction bin, Marcus placing them carefully inside on top of the other damaged goods scheduled for disposal. A case of dented soup cans, boxes of cereal with torn packaging, a jar of pasta sauce with a cracked lid. "Store policy is clear," Javier said, pulling up a document on another screen. "This is our Standard Operating Procedures Manual. Section 8.3, damaged goods with compromised packaging integrity must be removed from retail floor and processed for destruction. Once placed in the destruction bin, items have zero retail value and are considered waste." He looked at Derek. "You told him to destroy them." "He did. He followed your direct order." Officer Chen leaned forward, studying the footage. "Then what happened?" Javier showed the footage of Marcus returning to the destruction bin 20 minutes later. He pulled the containers out, looked around nervously, then carried them to his locker. To anyone watching without context, it looked like theft. But with the context, it looked like something else entirely. A desperate man taking something that was already designated as garbage because his daughter needed it to survive. "He didn't steal merchandise," Javier said quietly. "He took items from the trash, items that you specifically denied him the right to purchase, items that had no commercial value." Derek found his voice again, though it was shakier now. "That's semantics. He removed company property without authorization. It doesn't matter if it was in the trash. It's still theft." "Is it?" Officer Chen asked, looking at Derek with new skepticism. "Because I'm not sure a prosecutor would see it that way, especially when the defense argues that the items were waste with no value and that the employee was denied the right to purchase them through proper channels." She turned to Javier. "Is there more?" "There's more," Javier said grimly. He pulled up footage from a different day, 3 weeks earlier. This camera covered the customer service desk where returns and exchanges were processed. The angle showed Derek standing behind the counter during a particularly busy Saturday afternoon, filling in because they were short-staffed. A customer approached with a return, a blender still in its box. The customer said something, handed over a receipt. Derek processed the return, counting out bills from the cash register. He handed the money to the customer, who left satisfied. But then Derek did something odd. He pulled out his phone, checked something on the screen, then opened the register again. He removed several bills, folded them quickly, and slipped them into his pocket. "What was that?" Officer Paulson asked, suddenly more alert. Javier rewound and played it again, this time in slow motion. Derek had refunded the customer $63, the amount shown on the receipt, but then he'd taken an additional $40 from the register and pocketed it. "That's a false void," Officer Chen said, recognition dawning in her voice. He processed the return correctly in the system, but then he took extra cash and made it look like a larger refund. Common embezzlement technique. Javier pulled up more footage, showing the same pattern repeated over several different days. A return processed, money handed to the customer, then Derek's hand dipping back into the register when no one was looking. Sometimes it was $20, sometimes $50. Once it was $75. How much total? Officer Chen asked. Javier pulled up a spreadsheet he'd apparently been compiling. Based on the footage I've reviewed, approximately $3,200 over the past 6 weeks. That's actual theft, Mr. Vaughn. Theft of cash from your employer with clear intent to defraud. Derek's face was now the color of old newspaper. This is, he stammered. This is completely different. This has nothing to do with. With your credibility? Officer Chen interrupted. It has everything to do with your credibility. You're standing here trying to prosecute a man for taking garbage while you've been stealing thousands of dollars in cash. She shook her head. This changes the entire complexion of the case. Marcus felt like he was floating outside his body, watching the scene unfold from somewhere far away. The formula containers in his arms were getting heavy, his muscles aching from holding them for so long. But he couldn't seem to put them down. They were the reason for everything, the reason he was here, the reason his life had fallen apart, the reason Emma would be okay, at least for a few more days. Officer Chen turned to Marcus, her expression softer now. Sir, I need to understand something. Why didn't you just explain this from the beginning? Why didn't you tell us about the damaged goods policy? About being denied the right to purchase them? Marcus's voice was hoarse when he spoke. Would you have believed me? A desperate single father caught on camera taking formula? Or would you have believed the store manager in the pressed shirt who talks about prosecuting to the fullest extent of the law? The silence that followed was answer enough. People believed what they expected to believe. They believed the story that fit their preconceptions. A man like Marcus, tired and poor, and working a menial job, he was easy to believe as a thief. A man like Derek, confident and well-groomed, and speaking the language of corporate responsibility, he was easy to believe as a victim. Officer Chen looked at the monitors again, at the accumulated evidence of Marcus's character and Derek's corruption. Then she looked at her partner. Officer Paulson, I don't think we have a prosecutable theft case here. The defendant took items that had been classified as waste, items with no retail value. Any half-decent defense attorney would tear this apart. But he concealed them, Officer Paulson protested, though his heart didn't seem to be in it anymore. He hid them with intent to remove them from the premises. He was removing trash, Officer Chen countered, and the store manager who's requesting prosecution is now a suspect in an ongoing embezzlement case. She turned to Derek. Mr. Vaughn, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions about these register discrepancies. Derek's confident facade finally crumbled completely. This is a misunderstanding, he said, his voice climbing toward panic. Those footage angles, they don't show everything. I can explain. You'll have plenty of time to explain, Officer Chen said. She pulled out her handcuffs, but not for Marcus. Mr. Derek Vaughn, I'm detaining you for questioning regarding suspected embezzlement and fraud. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. As Officer Chen read Derek his rights, his face cycled through emotions like a slot machine. Shock, disbelief, anger, fear. He looked at Marcus with pure hatred in his eyes. This is your fault, he spat. You and your pathetic sob story. If you'd just paid for the formula like everyone else, none of this would have happened. If you'd just shown basic human decency, Javier said quietly, none of this would have happened. If you'd let him buy the damaged goods like policy allows, he never would have taken them from the trash. You created this situation, Mr. Vaughn. You manufactured a crisis because you enjoy having power over people who can't fight back. And then you got caught. Officer Paulson put Derek in handcuffs while Officer Chen called for a second unit to transport him. Derek was still protesting, still trying to argue, but his words had lost all power. He was no longer the manager. He was just another suspect in the back of a police car. Officer Chen turned to Marcus, and her expression was complicated. A mixture of sympathy and frustration, and something that might have been respect. Mr. Reed, technically, you did remove store property without authorization, even if it was damaged property, even if it was designated for destruction. I could still charge you. Marcus nodded slowly. He understood. The law wasn't always about justice. Sometimes it was just about rules. But I'm not going to, Officer Chen continued. Given the circumstances, given Mr. Vaughn's conduct and his refusal to follow store policy, and given that you have a 6-month-old daughter who needs this formula, I'm choosing to use my discretion. Consider this a warning. Don't take things that don't belong to you, even from the trash, even when you're desperate. There are resources available, food banks, assistance programs. I applied for them, Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. I make $40 too much to qualify. The system has a gap, and I fell through it. Officer Chen's jaw tightened. She looked like she wanted to say something, wanted to rail against the unfairness of a system that could let a man choose between feeding his daughter and breaking the law. But she was a police officer, not a social worker. Her job was to enforce the law, not to fix it. You're free to go, Mr. Reed, she said finally. Take care of your daughter. Marcus nodded. He turned to leave, but Javier stopped him with a hand on his shoulder. Wait, the security guard said. He turned to the monitors and pulled up one more piece of footage. This one showed the staff break room from earlier that evening, before Marcus's shift started. Derek was there, reviewing what looked like employee files on a laptop. He was making notes, checking boxes, building his case. The footage showed him pulling up Marcus's file specifically, scrolling through documented infractions, the 11:46 clock in, the slightly stained uniform, the 2-minute-long lunch break. He was hunting, Javier said quietly. He's been systematically targeting long-term employees and anyone he perceives as weak, building cases for termination so he can replace them with cheaper labor. Officer Chen watched the footage with a deepening frown. How many employees has he fired in the past year? Javier pulled up another document. 14. Most of them were over 40. Most of them had been here for more than 5 years. He replaced them with part-time workers making minimum wage with no benefits, saved the company money on paper, but destroyed people's lives in practice. That's age discrimination, Officer Chen said. That's a lawsuit waiting to happen. Javier nodded. I've been documenting it, sending reports to corporate, but they've been ignoring them because the store's profit margins have improved. He looked at Marcus. You weren't his first victim, Mr. Reed, and if we hadn't caught him tonight, you wouldn't have been his last. The security office had become cramped with bodies as word spread through the store about what was happening. Rosa had pushed her way in, followed by Tyler and 2 other night shift stalkers. Even some customers who'd witnessed the initial confrontation lingered near the doorway, craning their necks to see the monitors. The small space hummed with tension, and the collective held breath of people watching justice try to find its footing. Officer Chen stepped out of the security office, Derek in handcuffs beside her, Officer Paulson gripping his arm. The crowd in the corridor fell silent. Marcus followed behind them, still clutching the formula containers, Javier at his side like a guardian. They moved toward the front of the store, where the larger crowd from earlier had partially reconvened, drawn back by the commotion. Attention, everyone, Officer Chen called out, her voice carrying the natural authority of someone used to commanding chaotic situations. There's been a significant development in this situation. She glanced at Derek, whose face was a mask of barely contained rage. After reviewing the complete security footage, it's been determined that Mr. Reed here acted within a reasonable interpretation of store waste disposal policy. He will not be charged with any crime. A murmur rippled through the crowd. The woman with the organic produce, who'd been so quick to judge earlier, had the decency to look uncomfortable. The teenager who'd been filming had lowered his phone, his expression confused as the narrative he'd expected to capture completely reversed itself. However, Officer Chen continued, her tone hardening, during the course of our investigation, we discovered evidence of embezzlement by store manager Derek Vaughn. He's being taken into custody for questioning regarding the theft of approximately $3,200 in cash from this store over the past 6 weeks. That's a lie, Derek snarled, trying to pull away from Officer Paulson's grip. This is a setup. He's trying to deflect from his own crime. He pointed at Marcus with his cuffed hands. He stole formula. I saw it. Everyone saw it. What everyone saw, Javier said, stepping forward, was a man taking damaged merchandise from a destruction bin after you denied him the right to purchase it through proper channels. He pulled out his phone, which had several photos of the relevant sections of the employee handbook. Store Policy Section 8.3 clearly states that damaged goods with compromised packaging must be removed from the retail floor and destroyed. Once designated for destruction, items have zero retail value. Section 12.6 states that employees may purchase damaged goods at a 75% discount at management discretion. You denied his request out of cruelty, not policy, Javier continued, his voice steady but filled with quiet anger. And then you tried to prosecute him for salvaging garbage. Meanwhile, you've been stealing cash directly from the register for weeks. The footage doesn't lie, Mr. Vaughn. Your own words. Derek's face contorted. You're all ganging up on me, he shouted. This is a conspiracy. I'm the victim here. I'm the one who's been trying to run this store efficiently, trying to protect the company's bottom line. And this is how you treat me. You've been systematically targeting employees for termination, Rosa spoke up from the crowd, her voice ringing with decades of suppressed frustration. You've fired 14 people in the past year, good people, people with families, people who'd given years to this store. You called it efficiency, we called it cruelty. Other voices joined hers. Tyler stepped forward, his young face flushed with the courage of finally speaking truth to power. You threatened to fire me when I asked for time off to take my grandmother to chemotherapy. You said I wasn't a team player. Another stalker, a man in his 50s named Jim, raised his hand. You wrote me up for taking a bathroom break that lasted 7 minutes. Said I was stealing company time. I have diabetes. Sometimes things take longer. The dam had broken. One by one, employees shared their stories of Derek's petty tyrannies, his casual cruelties, his systematic dismantling of anything resembling dignity in the workplace. The picture that emerged was of a man who'd turned a job into a fiefdom, who'd wielded the small power he had like a weapon, against people who couldn't fight back. The assistant manager, a quiet woman named Linda who typically kept her head down, emerged from the back office with a folder. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was clear. I've been documenting the cash discrepancies for months, she said, holding up the folder. I reported them to corporate 3 times. They told me to take it up with Derek. When I tried, he threatened to fire me for insubordination. She looked at Officer Chen. If you need evidence of systematic theft, I have records of every suspicious transaction. Officer Chen took the folder, flipping through it quickly. Her expression grew grimmer with each page. Mr. Vaughn, you're in significantly more trouble than I initially thought, she nodded to Officer Paulson. Get him out of here. As they led Derek toward the exit, he made one last desperate attempt to salvage his narrative. You're all going to regret this, he shouted, his voice echoing off the store's high ceilings. I know people. I have lawyers. I'll sue every single one of you. This store will be shut down. You'll all be unemployed. And you... He fixed his gaze on Marcus with pure venom. You're still a thief. You can dress it up however you want, but everyone here knows what you really are. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. Even now, even with the truth exposed, Derek's accusations burrowed into the soft parts of his mind. The parts that whispered he was a failure, that Sarah would be ashamed, that Emma deserved better than a father who had to scavenge formula from the garbage. No, Rosa said, stepping between Derek and Marcus. Her voice was firm, maternal, fierce. Everyone here knows what you are, Derek. You're a bully who finally got caught. Marcus is a father trying to keep his daughter alive. There's a world of difference. Officer Paulson pulled Derek toward the door, but Derek managed one last look back at Marcus. A look of such pure, impotent rage that it seemed to poison the air between them. Then he was gone, the automatic doors closing behind him, and the store let out a collective breath it hadn't known it was holding. Officer Chen turned to Marcus, her expression softening. Mr. Reed, I need to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly. Your daughter, the one who needs this formula. Tell me about her. Marcus looked down at the containers in his arms, the familiar blue and white labels, the weight of them, the weight of everything. Emma is 6 months old, he said, his voice rough. She has severe food allergies. Most formulas make her break out in hives, make her stomach reject everything. She screams for hours. This, he held up the containers, this is the only kind she can tolerate. It costs $47 per container. She goes through one every 3 to 4 days. He felt his throat tightening, felt the words catching like fishhooks. My wife died giving birth to her. Placental abruption. Sarah, she made me promise to take care of Emma, to keep her safe. And I've tried. God, I've tried so hard. But the insurance lapsed after I lost my nursing job, and the formula costs more than I can afford, and I just wanted her to stop hurting. His voice broke on the last word. The formula containers slipped from his grip, hitting the floor with dull thuds that seemed impossibly loud in the quiet store. Marcus covered his face with his hands, and 7 months of holding everything together finally collapsed. The grief he'd been carrying since Sarah died, the fear that he couldn't keep Emma alive, the exhaustion of working double shifts while running on no sleep, the humiliation of tonight, the certainty that he was failing everyone who'd ever believed in him. It all came crashing down at once, and Marcus sobbed in the middle of the Save More supermarket, in front of strangers and co-workers with nothing left to hold him up. Rosa was there first. She wrapped her arms around him, this grandmother who barely knew him, and held him like he was one of her own. "It's okay, mijo," she whispered. "It's okay to break sometimes. You've been strong for so long." Tyler picked up the fallen formula containers, holding them carefully. Other employees gathered closer, forming a protective circle around Marcus. They weren't judging him. They were witnessing him, seeing his pain and recognizing it as valid, as real, as worthy of compassion. Javier stood slightly apart, his own eyes suspiciously bright. He waited until Marcus's sobs had quieted to ragged breaths before speaking. "Mr. Reed, I need to tell you something." Marcus looked up, his face wet, his eyes red. Javier's expression was gentle but serious. "I had a son," Javier said. "His name was Miguel. He would have been 32 this year." He paused, gathering himself. "When he was 2 years old, he got sick. Leukemia. We didn't have good insurance. My wife and I, we worked 3 jobs between us, trying to pay for treatments. I've stood where you're standing. I've had to choose between keeping the lights on and keeping my child alive. I know what that desperation feels like, how it makes you feel like you're drowning in shallow water where everyone else can breathe just fine." "What happened to him?" Marcus asked, though part of him already knew the answer from the past tense, from the weight in Javier's voice. "We lost him at 4 years old," Javier said simply. "We'd done everything right, followed every protocol, spent every dollar, prayed every prayer, and we still lost him." He looked at Marcus with an intensity that was almost painful. "But you haven't lost Emma. She's still here. She's still fighting. And now you have a chance to keep fighting for her without having to choose between your integrity and her survival." He pulled out his wallet and extracted several bills. "This is $140. It's not much, but it'll buy you 3 containers of formula. A week of breathing room. Take it." Marcus shook his head automatically. I can't. Take your money. You already did so much." "You're not taking it," Javier said firmly. "I'm giving it. There's a difference. When Miguel was sick, people helped us. Strangers, neighbors, people we barely knew. They showed up with groceries, with gas money, with an hour of babysitting so my wife could sleep. I've spent the last 28 years trying to pay that kindness forward. Let me." Before Marcus could respond, Rosa dug into her purse. "I've got $60, she said, pressing the bills into Marcus's hand. "For Emma." Tyler pulled out his wallet. "I only have 20, but it's yours." Linda, the assistant manager, stepped forward. "I'm authorizing an immediate advance on your next paycheck. $500. You've earned it with all those unpaid hours you've worked." One by one, other employees came forward. A $5 bill from a part-time cashier, $20 from a produce manager, $15 from the deli worker. They piled the money into Marcus's hands until he was holding nearly $800, a fortune of crumpled bills and coins, a tangible representation of human kindness. "I don't," Marcus started, but his voice failed him again. He looked at their faces, these people who'd seen him at his lowest, who'd witnessed his humiliation and his breakdown, and who'd responded not with judgment but with compassion. "I don't know how to thank you. You take care of that baby," Rosa said, squeezing his hand. You take care of yourself. And when you're back on your feet someday, you help someone else who's drowning. That's how you thank us." Officer Chen had been standing quietly to the side, observing the scene with the careful neutrality required of her profession. But now she stepped forward, pulling a business card from her pocket. "Mr. Reed, I'm going to give you some information. There's a program through the county health department. It's specifically for families who fall through the cracks of traditional assistance. The income threshold is higher, and they have emergency funds for things like specialized formula." She pressed the card into his hand. "Call them tomorrow. Tell them Officer Chen referred you. They'll help." Marcus looked at the card, at the money in his hands, at the circle of faces surrounding him. People who owed him nothing, people who'd chosen to see his humanity rather than his desperation. He thought about Sarah, about the promise he'd made to her. He thought about Emma, waiting at home, unaware that her father had just been saved by the kindness of strangers. Javier put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You remind me of myself back then," he said quietly. "Same look in your eyes, like you're carrying the whole world and terrified you're going to drop it. But here's what I learned. You don't have to carry it alone. The weight doesn't get lighter, but more hands make it bearable." Marcus nodded, unable to speak. He bent down and picked up the 2 containers of formula, the ones that had started this whole nightmare. Rosa gently took them from him and placed them in a shopping bag along with a few other items, diapers and baby food and a small stuffed animal. "For Emma," she said with a smile. "Tell her it's from her tia Rosa." As the crowd began to disperse, people returning to their shopping or their shifts, Marcus stood in the center of the store, feeling like he'd just lived through an earthquake that had somehow rearranged the landscape into something more livable. The humiliation was still there, the shame of having been accused, but it was covered now by something else, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The morning sun streamed through the large windows of Save More supermarket, painting golden rectangles across the freshly waxed floors. Marcus Reed stood in the manager's office, not as a defendant or a suspect, but as the newly promoted assistant store manager. 3 months had passed since that terrible night, 3 months that had transformed not just his life, but the entire culture of the store. The office that had once belonged to Derek Vaughn had been stripped of its aggressive corporate decor and rebuilt into something warmer, more human. Photos of employees and their families lined one wall, a testimony to the people who made the store run. Corporate had gotten involved 2 days after Derek's arrest. The regional director, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Flores, had driven down personally after Linda sent her the security footage and the documentation of Derek's systematic abuses. She'd spent an entire day interviewing employees, reviewing records, and watching Marcus work his shift. At the end of that day, she'd called Marcus into the office and offered him Derek's position. "I can't be a store manager," Marcus had protested. "I'm just a night stalker. I don't have management experience." "You've been managing your daughter's survival for 6 months on your own," Patricia had replied. "You've been managing to show up and do excellent work while dealing with grief and poverty and a system designed to fail you. That's more relevant experience than any business degree. Besides," she'd added with a slight smile, "the employees trust you. They respect you. That's something you can't train." Marcus had accepted, but only as assistant store manager. He'd insisted that Linda, who'd risked her job to document Derek's crimes, deserved the top position. Patricia had agreed, and the 2 of them had spent the past 3 months rebuilding Save More from the ground up. The most significant change was the community care program, Marcus's brainchild. It was startlingly simple. Damaged goods that couldn't be sold but were still perfectly usable, items with dented cans or torn labels or broken seals, were no longer thrown away. Instead, they were collected in a special section at the back of the store where anyone could take what they needed. No questions asked, no proof of need required, just a sign that read, "If you need it, take it." We all struggle sometimes. The program had been met with skepticism from corporate at first. Patricia had worried about liability, about people abusing the system, about lost revenue. But Marcus had made the case with quiet passion. We're already writing these items off as losses, he'd argued. We're already paying to have them hauled to a landfill. This way, we're building community goodwill, and we're feeding families who need help. The cost is the same. The impact is immeasurable. Within a month, the community care section had become the heart of the store. Young mothers stopped by after their shifts at other jobs, picking up baby food and diapers. Elderly people on fixed incomes found canned goods and bread. College students discovered damaged packages of pasta and rice. The section was never empty for long, a constant flow of need being met with simple, quiet dignity. Marcus had also insisted on other changes. The petty write-up system Derek had used as a weapon was abolished. Employees were given consistent schedules rather than the chaos of constantly shifting shifts. The break room was renovated with a comfortable couch, a decent coffee maker, and a small library of donated books. Most importantly, managers were required to spend at least one shift per month working alongside their employees, stocking shelves or running registers, staying connected to the reality of the work. The store had become a different place. People smiled more. The turnover rate, which had been catastrophic under Derek, had dropped to nearly zero. Customers noticed the change too. The store felt friendlier, more welcoming. Sales actually increased. Javier had become an integral part of Marcus's life. The security guard had taken to visiting Marcus and Emma on his days off, showing up with small gifts, a stuffed animal for Emma, a bag of groceries for Marcus, his presence more valuable than any physical offering. He'd become the grandfather Emma would never have otherwise, teaching Marcus how to ask for help, how to accept kindness without shame, how to let people into the fortress of grief he'd built around himself. On Saturdays, Javier would come over and watch Emma while Marcus attended nursing board meetings. Marcus had begun the long process of reinstating his nursing license, working with a sympathetic board member who'd helped him structure a pathway back to his profession. It would take time, require additional training and probationary periods, but it was possible. He could be a nurse again. He could honor Sarah's memory by doing the work they'd both loved. Rosa had become Emma's unofficial grandmother, insisting on babysitting at least twice a week. She refused payment, saying that her own grandchildren lived too far away, and Emma was filling a grandmother-shaped hole in her life. On those evenings, Marcus would come home to find Rosa singing Spanish lullabies to Emma, the two of them rocking in the old chair that had been Sarah's favorite. Emma herself had transformed. With consistent access to her formula, with the financial stress lifted enough that Marcus could focus on her needs rather than just survival, she'd blossomed. She was 8 months old now, pulling herself up on furniture, babbling constantly, her smile a miniature echo of Sarah's that still made Marcus's heart ache and soar simultaneously. Her medical bills were being covered through the county program Officer Chen had referred them to, and Marcus had even managed to find a sliding-scale pediatrician who specialized in food allergies. The break room had become Emma's second home on the days when Mrs. Chen couldn't watch her. Linda had approved it immediately, saying that Emma was good for morale. Employees would spend their breaks making funny faces at her, competing to see who could make her laugh the loudest. Rosa had knitted her a tiny Save More vest, and Emma had become the store's unofficial mascot. On a Tuesday morning in late spring, Marcus was training a new employee when he saw himself reflected back at him. Her name was Jessica, 23 years old, with haunted eyes and hands that shook slightly when she filled out her paperwork. She had a 2-year-old son, she'd told him during the interview, and she was 2 months behind on rent. The desperation rolled off her in waves. Marcus took extra time with her orientation, showing her not just how to stock shelves, but where the community care section was, how to access the employee assistance program, which local organizations could help with rent and utilities. As they walked past the baby aisle, Jessica stopped, staring at the formula with an expression Marcus recognized all too well. "My son has allergies too," she said quietly. "Not as severe as some, but the regular formula makes him sick. The special kind is so expensive. I've been watering it down to make it last longer. I know I'm not supposed to, but I don't know what else to do." Marcus felt his chest tighten with recognition and memory. "Come with me," he said gently. He led her to the community care section, where several containers of damaged formula sat on the shelf. This is for anyone who needs it, he explained. No judgment, no questions. If you need formula for your son, you take it. That's what it's here for. Jessica stared at the formula like it was a mirage that might disappear if she reached for it. I can't just take it, she whispered. That's charity. That's community, Marcus corrected gently. 3 months ago, I was exactly where you are. Scared, desperate, trying to figure out how to feed my daughter on a paycheck that didn't stretch far enough. This store, these people, he gestured around them. They saved my life. Now I get to help save someone else's. That's not charity. That's just humans taking care of each other. Tears welled in Jessica's eyes. She picked up 2 containers of formula, holding them like they were made of gold. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means. I do, Marcus said softly. I know exactly what it means. He handed her his business card. If you ever need anything, if you're struggling with childcare or bills or just need someone to talk to who understands, you call me. Day or night. You're not alone anymore. As Jessica walked away clutching the formula, Marcus felt something shift inside him. The weight he'd been carrying since Sarah died, the crushing responsibility of being Emma's sole protector, the shame of his own need. It was still there, but it felt different now. Distributed, shared, bearable. That evening, Marcus stood in the store after closing, Emma on his hip, looking out through the large windows at the sunset, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Javier was beside him, having stayed late to help with inventory. Rosa was restocking the community care section, humming softly to herself. Linda was in the office, reviewing schedules with the kindness that had always been there, but could now be expressed without fear. You did good today, Javier said, nodding toward where Jessica had been. Helping her like that. Marcus shifted Emma to his other hip. She grabbed at his shirt, babbling something that might have been Dada or might have been random baby sounds, but either way, it made his heart full. I was just paying it forward, doing what you all did for me. That's how it works, Javier said. That's how we survive. Not by being strong enough to carry everything alone, but by being brave enough to let others help carry it. Marcus looked down at Emma, at her bright eyes and her Sarah smile, and her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. He thought about the night he'd stood in this same store, caught and humiliated, certain his life was over. He thought about the formula containers that had represented his failure, his desperation, his inability to provide. Now those same containers, stacked neatly in the community care section, represented something entirely different: hope, connection, the simple truth that no one has to struggle alone. Sometimes the worst moment of your life is just the beginning of your redemption, Marcus said softly, more to himself than to Javier. Sometimes you have to break completely before you can be rebuilt into something stronger. That's the truth, Javier agreed. He put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture of friendship and pride. Your wife would be proud of you, of how you've taken care of Emma, of how you've taken care of yourself, of how you're taking care of others now. Marcus felt the familiar ache of Sarah's absence, but it was gentler now, wrapped in gratitude for the time they'd had rather than just grief for the time they'd lost. I hope so, he whispered. I'm trying. That's all any of us can do. Emma chose that moment to laugh, a bright burbling sound that filled the quiet store. Javier laughed too, reaching over to tickle her foot. She's happy. That's how you know you're doing it right. As the last light faded from the sky and the store's interior lights created a warm glow against the gathering darkness, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in 8 months. Peace. Not the absence of pain or struggle or worry. Those were all still there, woven into the fabric of single parenthood and making ends meet. But peace, nonetheless. The peace that came from knowing he wasn't alone, that there were hands ready to help him carry the weight when it got too heavy, that his daughter was safe, healthy, and loved by an entire community of people who'd chosen to see their humanity reflected in each other. He kissed Emma's forehead, breathing in her baby smell, feeling her solid weight in his arms. The formula containers that had almost destroyed his life now sat in the community care section, waiting to save someone else. And Marcus, who'd once believed he was nothing more than a failure and a thief, had become a bridge between desperation and hope. The store's lights hummed softly overhead. Outside, the city moved through its evening rhythms, and inside, a father held his daughter and finally allowed himself to breathe, to hope, to believe that the worst was behind them, and the future, though still uncertain, was bright with possibility. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you watching this from? Drop a comment and let us know, because your presence here means more than you know. And if you can, share one word that describes how this story made you feel. Was it hopeful? Angry at the injustice? Grateful for the kindness? Your words create a map of emotions that connects us all. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that sometimes our darkest moments are just the beginning of our redemption, please consider subscribing. There are so many more stories waiting to be told, stories of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, stories of hidden strength and unexpected kindness, stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Thank you for spending your time with us, for witnessing Marcus's journey from humiliation to hope, from isolation to community. Until next time, remember that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, be generous, and when you see someone struggling, don't look away. Reach out. Because sometimes the smallest act of kindness can save someone's entire world. Stay strong, stay compassionate, and remember that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the bravest thing any of us can do.